Our presentation that we're going to talk about is digestion and colon care. Now, this is very important. We've talked about in our last lecture the importance of choosing good food and choosing those foods that will build a good, strong body. But it's also important not just to put the good foods in, but that those good foods can be assimilated into our body. Because if we put something in and it doesn't actually get into the tissues, even though it's good, it didn't help us. So we're going to spend this next portion of our time together just talking about how our body actually works. I've found over the years, as we've done our presentations, that a lot of times people don't really know how their body works or where their body organs are.
And where is your liver? And where is your liver?
Here behind.
I'm guessing right here. I don't know.
Right there? Okay.
Somewhere around there. I can't tell you exactly what organ it's next to, but yeah.
Down in this area.
Okay.
Somewhere in your stomach area.
Okay.
And so we decided to include a presentation that would help give us a little bit more understanding of how our body actually works, where those body parts are that we're going to talk about, what their function is. We're not going to go into a lot of detail, but just so we sort of have an overview of how digestion actually takes place. Digestion and elimination, two very, very important functions in the body. So to start with, I thought I would start with a quiz. This is going to be a little bit more interactive, so you people have to help me out here. I want to know what this long organ is right here. Does anybody know what that is? Esophagus. You guys are good. Okay, what about this organ here? That's the liver. Good. Little guy under here? Gallbladder. Okay. Let's see. What about this organ here? Large intestine, okay. And what about in here? Small intestine. You know, sometimes people say to me, why is that called the small intestine? It looks like there's so much more of it than the other one. And that's true, actually. It's much longer. This one here is only about 5.5 feet in length, but it's about 2.5 inches in diameter. It's a much larger diameter, which is why it is called the large intestine. The small intestine has a smaller diameter, and therefore it's called the small intestine. Okay, let's see. This organ right here? Stomach, okay. And last but not least, what about in here? Pancreas, okay, I heard it. Very good. Okay, we're going to look at food as it enters our digestive system, and we're going to follow it through the body. So as we eat food, comes into our mouth, and this is where carbohydrates begin to be acted on. Now, carbohydrates are simply a broad classification for our starches and our sugars. But this actually begins to take place, this digestive process, in our mouths. Very important then that we chew our food very well. Now, as we chew our food, we mix it with saliva. How much saliva do you think your body is producing in a day? If you think about your foods that you're eating, maybe you're eating 2 or 3 meals in a day, how much saliva do you think? If you envision your mouth mixing saliva with the food there, how much saliva do you think your body is producing in a day? It's 1 to 1.5 quarts, or you can roughly liters would be equivalent in a day. Roughly in about that much in a day that's being produced. When I first learned that, I thought that was amazing because I never really stopped to think about how much saliva the body is actually producing. And this isn't just water. Saliva is actually a composition that is specifically designed to help break down the carbohydrates, the simple sugars, as we chew our foods. Now, what is saliva composed of? Do you have any ideas as to what saliva is composed of? Okay, water would be the very first component. Any other ideas what might be in there? Okay, enzymes would be in there. We've got mineral salts, and there's also mucus and enzymes. That's the components that saliva is made up of. And this is a very special mixture, as I've mentioned, that your body makes up. It has a fairly alkaline nature to it, and it specifically will work on the digesting of carbohydrates. If anyone's ever experienced low blood sugar, and you know when you eat something sweet and right away that picks you up, that's because some of those simple sugars are already being absorbed into your system and going to work. The glucose is being produced into adenosine triphosphate, as Rudy has talked about earlier. Now, oftentimes people come to us and we find that they are not drinking enough water during the day, and so then they have the habit of drinking water with their meals. Now, if you're drinking water or actually any other liquid with your meals, you're going to dilute the saliva that your body has produced. You're also going to dilute your digestive juices, which we'll talk about in a moment, and that is going to impair your digestion. So you will find that your foods, though you may be putting good quality food into your body, it's not actually digesting as well as it could if you were not drinking with your meal. So try to do your drinking apart from your meal time. If you drink a lot of water in between, and you can drink up to about a half an hour before your meal begins, and then wait for about an hour and a half to 2 hours after your meal, start drinking again. Drink a lot of water in between your meal times, and you will find you have enough saliva for your meal. You'll find your mouth is not dry, and your food will digest much better. I'd like to share with you this quote. It comes from a book called Counsels on Diet and Foods. And if you're interested in knowing where you can get a copy of this book, I believe that that information will be given to you at the end of this video. And this is what this quote says. It says, taken with meals, water diminishes the flow of the salivary gland. So it's actually diminishing the flow when you drink water. And the colder the water, the greater the injury to the stomach. Ice water or ice lemonade drunk with meals will arrest the digestion. That means it stops it until the system has imparted sufficient warmth to the stomach to enable it to take up its work again. Hot drinks are debilitating. Isn't that interesting? Hot drinks are debilitating. And besides, those who indulge in their use become slaves to the habit. Food should not be washed down. No drink is needed with meals. Eat slowly and allow the saliva to mingle with the food. The more liquid there is taken into the stomach with the meals, the more difficult it is for the food to digest, for the liquid must first be absorbed. Counsels on Diet and Foods, page 420. Now, this also includes if you're juicing. We talked about in our previous lecture about juicing and including that in your diet to add more nutrients into what you're getting into your daily routine. And your juicing, again, should be taken apart from mealtime as your water. So you can take it, again, up to a half an hour before your meal starts, or wait for an hour and a half to 2 hours after your meal is finished before you start drinking your juice, because your juice also will impair the digestion. Any liquid taken with your food is going to cause your digestion to slow down and to not be as good as it could. Okay, so we've chewed our food well, we've mixed it with the saliva in our mouths, carbohydrates have started their process of digestion. Now the food is going to move down the esophagus and into the stomach. And it moves by something called peristaltic action. It's a squeezing motion that moves the food down into our stomach. When I was young, I used to think when you swallowed food, it just dropped. But if you're of that opinion, you can try a little experiment. Try standing on your head and swallowing food, and you'll find it actually will go against gravity into your stomach. Though it's not very comfortable, and I don't recommend trying to eat that way, but it does show you that peristaltic action works even against gravity. So the food now is in our stomach, and this is where proteins are going to be acted on. Okay, proteins. Again, I used to think that all digestion took place in the stomach. But actually your stomach is for breaking down protein, and that's why we have those very strong acids in our stomach, is to break those proteins down. Now I want to show you the pH scale. Rudy showed it to you in an earlier lecture on a horizontal plane. This is the same scale on a vertical plane. So you'll see on the bottom we have very acidic, we have pH neutral in the middle, and basic or alkaline at the top. Same scale, just vertical. And what I want to show you is some of the various pH. Okay, bile. Bile is produced by your liver and stored in your gallbladder. Okay? And it's used in breaking down fats. So we're going to talk about that in a moment. It's very alkaline. It's got a pH of 8. And pancreatic juice. So they're both alkaline substances that the body produces. Now we have saliva. I mentioned earlier that saliva is very close to pH neutral as water, so it's right there in the middle. Dropping down here, we find gastric juice, and it's down around a pH of about 2. It's very acidic. The gastric juice in your stomach for breaking down those proteins is very acidic. And that is the reason why when we swallow our food that it actually halts the digestion of carbohydrates. Carbohydrates need an alkaline environment, an alkaline pH, in order to digest. And so they do well in our mouth if we mix the saliva well with them. But then when we swallow and it goes down into the stomach, that high acid level in there, very acidic, it actually halts the digestion of the carbohydrates. And now they will just sit there while the protein is breaking down. So it's very important you chew your food well to begin with, otherwise your carbohydrates didn't get a good start to digestion. Okay? Now one other thing I want to point out here is lemon juice. Lemon juice is also right down there with gastric juice. If you find yourself at some point in time with a meal that did not digest well and you have some indigestion happening, very simple natural remedy that you can do, take a half a lemon, fresh lemon, squeeze that and drink that juice down. It's going to put more acid into your stomach. It's going to make a more acidic environment, and you will find most times that will take care of your indigestion. Very simple remedy that you can do. So I just thought I'd mention that since we were right there. Okay. How much digestive juice now do you think our body is going to produce in a day? We talked about how much saliva. How much digestive juice? Now this is going to be all your digestive juices that are going to be produced from the pancreas and the stomach. Any ideas what we would be talking about here? No thoughts on that? No takers? 2 liters? Okay. Well, it's actually a little bit more. We have a gallon, and we have up to 1.5 gallons actually daily. That's a lot of digestive juices that are being produced. And again, just like saliva, this is a complex formula from each of the organs that are producing these juices that are very necessary for breaking down those foods that we're consuming. This isn't just water, it's a formula. And our body, it takes energy to produce these digestive juices. Now, very interestingly, research has shown that people who consume predominantly raw foods in their diet, or a greater percentage of their diet coming from raw foods that contain those enzymes and nutrients that we've been talking about in an earlier lecture, their bodies actually will produce less than what someone would be producing if they're consuming a high protein, predominantly cooked food type of a diet. In fact, one individual was sharing on her testimony that when she switched to an all raw food diet, and again, I just want to make it clear, that's not what we're promoting is a 100% raw food diet. We are just promoting a greater percentage of your food to come from raw foods. But this individual had chosen an all raw food diet for a number of months, and after about 2 months, she found in her research that the needs of the body for digestive juices dropped to about a cup as compared to up to 1.5 gallons. Now that is significant. The reason I want to bring that out is because of this. If you're a person who has a disease or you know someone who's struggling with a disease, you know that it takes energy for your body to get well. And if your body is tying up a lot of its energy in producing digestive juices to break down these foods, then it's using a lot of energy in an unnecessary area. You can free up some of the energy for healing simply by choosing more of your foods from the upper half of that hierarchy of food preparation that we talked about in an earlier presentation. So you can see how your body can actually, by the foods that you're choosing, simply through the digestive process, can either become more sick or it can be made well just in the digesting, in what it's having to produce to digest those foods. Okay, so the food is in our stomach now, and the proteins have been worked on. Can you see the angle of your stomach? Your stomach sits on a bit of an angle. It's not horizontal, it's not vertical either, but it does sit on a bit of an angle there. And that's very important for you to keep in mind, because as your stomach digests food, it uses both muscle and gravity action to digest that food. Now, what happens if you eat a meal and you go and you lay down after that meal? What's going to happen to that food? It's not going to digest well, because now we don't have the action of gravity. You still have the muscle action, but it's going to be much more difficult for your body to digest that food. And I don't know about you, we've probably all experienced this at some point in our lives where we've eaten a meal, we're very tired, and we go and lay down after that meal, and we wake up a couple hours later and it feels like that food is all still sitting there and it didn't digest. And you know that's exactly what happened. It's still sitting there. And when food does not digest in your body, it will either ferment, if it's a carbohydrate or sugar base, or it will putrefy if it's a protein type food. And anything that's going to break down by those processes are going to be toxic to your body. So you want your food to digest, you don't want it to break down through putrefaction or fermentation. Okay, the food now is going to move into the duodenum and out into the small intestine. Now it takes about approximately 3 to 4 hours, depending on what it is that you consumed, for that food to digest in your stomach. And then it takes approximately 1 hour for your stomach to actually empty that food out. So depending on what you're eating, if you're eating a basically fruit meal, a fruit meal is going to take about 3 hours to digest and 1 hour to empty the stomach. So give yourself a good 4 hours before your stomach would be empty. A vegetable-based meal will take an hour longer, roughly, to break down those vegetables and then move them out of the stomach. So approximately 5 hours when you have a vegetable meal. Now this is important because a lot of times people come into our office and we find they are very sick, they're not digesting their foods, they've got all kinds of problems happening, and what we find is taking place with them is they're having breakfast, then they're having a snack, and lunch and a snack, and another snack, and supper, and a snack before bedtime, and that stomach is always keeping busy. And the food cannot digest. They did a study on some nurses. They took a group of nurses. They gave them breakfast about 8 o'clock. Then they gave them a mid-morning snack around 10. Then they fed them lunch, gave them a mid-afternoon snack, fed them supper, and then they checked the contents of their stomach about 8 o'clock that night. And guess what they found? They found remnants of breakfast still in their stomach. It hadn't digested. And as we talked about, that's either going to now be fermenting, or putrefying, depending on what it is that they had consumed. So that food does not digest. That's very taxing on your whole digestive tract, but it also is producing toxin in your body, and it's going to lead to disease in the system. So we shouldn't be taking anything into our body in between our meal times. We should be allowing adequate time for that food to digest. And I want to share with you a quote here. And this quote says that regularity in eating is very important for health of the body and serenity of the mind. Never should a morsel of food pass the lips between meals. Very important. A morsel is how much? Very small, okay? So never should a morsel of food pass the lips between meals. And if you follow that counsel, you will find that your digestion will improve. You will have better health. Now, another problem that we see quite often with individuals coming into the office to see us is that they are combining foods that do not digest well together. Now, we're not going to go into a lot of food combining issues here tonight, but we do want to just mention a very common error that many, many people make, and that is combining fruits and vegetables together at the same meal. As we talked about, fruits take approximately 3 hours to digest and 1 hour to empty the stomach, so you need 4 hours for a fruit meal before that stomach will be empty. Vegetables take an hour longer, so you need 5 hours for a vegetable meal, usually. Now, it can vary depending on what you're eating, of course. Now, if you combine those together in the same meal, the fruit is going to sit there waiting for those vegetables to finish their processing, and they will start to ferment. Those sugars in the fruit will start the process of fermentation happening in the stomach. And people end up with things like gas and bloating and a lot of very uncomfortable symptoms happening in the body. So those two foods should definitely be avoided at the same meal. Don't combine them together. And again, here's a quote. This comes from the book Counsels on Diet and Foods. This is page 112. This says, fruit and vegetables taken at one meal produce acidity of the stomach. Then impurity of the blood results, and the mind is not clear because the digestion is imperfect. You should understand that every organ of the body is to be treated with respect. In the matter of diet, you must reason from cause to effect, as Rudy has mentioned. And we do need to treat our body with respect. As we mentioned, we can't go out and get another body if this body breaks down. This is the only one that we have. Very important to take care of it. Okay, I want to share with you a very interesting fact. Our body produces an enzyme called renin, and renin acts on the soluble protein portion of milk to break that down. Now, our body only produces this enzyme until the age of weaning. About 2 or 3, somewhere in there, the body gradually stops producing this enzyme. And when I found this out, I thought, this is very interesting. It's almost like nature is telling us, you don't have to drink milk. You think about it. You see animals in the wild. How many animals after the age of weaning drink milk? They don't. The only animals really that you see that will drink milk are the domesticated animals that we give milk to. But in the wild, they don't do that. And our bodies are telling us we don't need to consume milk. And this is acid producing in our body, as we've mentioned. Okay, so the food has moved into our small intestine now, and it's actually no longer called food. It's called chyme, C-H-Y-M-E. And it's now in a form that our small intestine can start to absorb nutrients. This is where a lot of nutrients are absorbed. Fats begin to be worked on here, and as that food moves through the duodenum into the small intestine, bile is added to help break those fats down. Pancreatic juices are added, and if you remember from our pH scale, pancreatic juice and bile are very alkaline. They're a pH of about 8, somewhere in there. Very alkaline. So now they're going to work to bring that very acid mixture that came out of the stomach, they're going to work to bring that pH back up more alkaline so that now all of the food particles, the carbohydrates, proteins, everything can be worked on and digested. If you think about your digestive tract, it's actually one long tube. It starts at the mouth, it works its way through the body, and it has various shapes and various functions in different parts, but it's really one long tube. Now, if you put something in a tube, let's give an example. If you're going through a tunnel in a mountain, are you in the mountain? Or are you passing through the mountain? Okay? Food, when you put it into your food tube, it technically is not yet in your body. It has to get through the walls of that food tube to actually get into your body. Do you follow me? Okay? A lot of times people come to us and they say, you know, I am eating all the right things. I'm eating lots of good raw foods and drinking juices, and I'm doing all of these things. Why is it that I am still sick? And oftentimes we can trace it back to there is a fault with their absorption. The nutrients, though they may be putting good nutrients in, for some reason, depending on what the problem is, it's not actually absorbing through that food tube. It's not getting into their cells and making the difference where it needs to. So that's one key reason that we want to go into this next bit of our presentation, where we're going to focus a little bit more on what happens now as your food moves through your small intestine and large intestine, because it's very important for nutrients to be absorbed in the body. It's one thing to put them in, but very important that they're absorbed into the system. So now this food, we followed it through the digestive tract, and it's now in the small intestine where it's called chyme, C-H-Y-M-E. And it's going to move through the small intestine and into the large intestine. Now, as it's moving through the small intestine, if we have consumed a lot of sugar in our meal, it will actually move very slow, or depending on the amount of sugar, it could possibly even stop for a period of time in that small intestine while your body deals with the sugar that was consumed. Now, what happens if that food is not moving through the system as it should? What happens if it just comes to a halt and stops there in its digestive process? What's going to happen to sugar? What did we learn? Okay, sugar is going to ferment. So very important then again that you're very careful, very moderate, and I know this time of the year, of course, is going to be a lot of temptation to us maybe, but very important that we remember these things with the holiday season approaching, that we want to be careful to not take in too much of something that's going to impair our digestion. This is something that will oftentimes cause problems with a lot of bloating and gas and indigestion that people often come to us for. Okay, the food now, it's moved into the large intestine. And in the large intestine, your ascending colon, it's going to go up and down in that portion of the colon for a period of time. Water and minerals are going to be absorbed, and then it's going to take a little bend under the liver. That's called your hepatic flexure. It's going to move across the body. That's your transverse colon. It's going to bend again at the spleen and then move out of the body. Now, this whole process from ingestion of food until the food actually exits the body should take between 12 to 24 hours. Now, I'm a certified colon hydrotherapist, and I get into my office very regularly individuals who their transit time, this is what we call transit time, their transit time can be, believe it or not, I have some people that it takes a month. A month. They're having one bowel movement a month. Now, your body is not designed to be carrying that around in your system. And what happens is that matter that's sitting there in your body, it starts to, as we've talked about, ferment and putrefy, and it's continually pumping out toxin into the system. So it's very important that our transit time is in good shape. Now, a lot of times people say to us, well, You know, is it really important that we talk about this part of the body very much? You know, I can talk to you about your liver and your heart and your brain and probably any other organ in your body, and we're very comfortable to discuss it. But when we get to our colon, for some reason in our society, we really don't want to talk about it. But I want to ask you a question. If the President of the United States, we'll pick on him tonight, if the President of the United States was to go away on a vacation for a couple of months, how many of you would know, if you didn't read about it in the newspaper and you didn't hear about it on television and your neighbor didn't tell you, how many of you would know that he was gone? You probably wouldn't. It doesn't impact your day-to-day life. What would happen if the garbage collectors went on strike for 3 days? You would know. Your garbage would pile up outside, and the neighborhood would begin to smell, and the flies would gather, and the dogs would tear it up all over the place. We would know. It's the same way with the body. The brain is very important. That's the president of the body. But you know what? If the garbage collection system is not working very effectively, then the president is not going to be very effective in his job either. So it's very important that the whole system is working well. And we're going to focus a little bit on the area of elimination from the body, because it is a matter that I find in probably about 90% of the population right now that we are having a lot of problems specifically stemming from poor elimination from the colon. Toxins are being absorbed back into the body, and it's the root cause of many, many diseases that are happening. Okay, composition of feces. Maybe what I'm going to do is just blank the screen out for a minute. What is it that you think your body is actually getting rid of here? Now the food's moved through, you ate a wonderful Christmas dinner, and it's moved through your system. What is actually going to get your body actually going to get rid of? Indigestible fiber? Okay. That's usually what most people think, and that was actually what I thought too until I read a book by Dr. John Harvey Kellogg. Anybody hear of Dr. John Harvey Kellogg? Okay. He's a pretty well-known doctor. He had a sanitarium in Battle Creek, Michigan around the turn of the century. Very famous. People came to him from all over the world. And he was very successful in many, many of the new treatments that he came up with. And he wrote a book, it's called Colon Hygiene. And from his book, he's got a very interesting quote which I'm going to put up here on the screen, where he actually breaks down what your body is getting rid of. And I want to show you this because I think it's important that we actually know what our bodies are getting rid of. The chief constituents of the feces are as follows. There's bile. Where'd the bile come from? From the liver, okay. Remains of digestive juices, especially of the pancreatic juice, okay. That was where we had a gallon or a gallon and a half that our body was producing. Mucus, excretory substances thrown off by the intestinal mucous membrane. Microbes, and various poisons produced by microbes such as indole, skatole, pyrrole, and numerous other poisons, together with some, what is that word? Small amounts of the various food principles and water. Small amounts of the various food principles. Mostly what your body is getting rid of is toxic waste. Your body needs to get rid of toxic waste out of the system, along with these poisons. Indole, skatole, and pyrrole, those are very toxic substances that are produced when your body is breaking down proteins, oftentimes, and these are very, very toxic to the system. Your body needs to get rid of those. And you know what we find in society is that oftentimes we tend to put our body on hold. We will say, you know what, I am really busy right now. I need to finish this report. I need to finish up with this phone call. I'm busy driving and I just don't want to get off the freeway right now. We will make numerous excuses as to why we are going to put our body on hold and force that body to keep that toxic matter in there until we feel that it's a convenient time to get it out. And what I find happens as a colon hydrotherapist, over time, your body will lose the sensitivity of getting rid of this matter. And your colon then becomes sluggish, And it may start with, instead of a bowel movement every day, you may start having a bowel movement every other day. And then I get people to my office and it's once every 3 days, it's once every week, then it's every couple of weeks. And gradually as the years go by, that colon becomes more and more sluggish until we are at the place where we're just flooding, constantly flooding our body with toxin. And that is what's called auto-intoxication of the body. Very important that we make sure things are moving through in a timely fashion. And I'll give you a very easy way that you can check the transit time of your body. With a meal, you can pick on any meal you want. Breakfast is probably going to be your easier meal. Take a couple tablespoons of sesame seeds. Sesame seeds. Don't grind them, just eat them, just chew them up and swallow them. Doesn't matter how hard you chew, you're not going to get all of those sesame seeds chewed up. Swallow them. Check the time that you eat your sesame seeds, and then check when you see them come out, the last time that you see them come out. Sometimes they will come out over a couple of bowel movements. Check when the last time is that you see them come out. And that is what is called your transit time. So you can check and see, and if you're not eliminating within 12 to 24 hours, then you are auto-intoxicating. You're putting toxin into your body. Your body will be becoming more acidic, and you will be setting yourself up for disease in your system. Dr. William Hunter says this. He says, the colon is the sewer system of the body, but with neglect and abuse, it becomes a cesspool of toxins that spill over into the body. This is the definition of regularity. If you eat a meal, you should have a bowel movement, okay? Because you're putting substance in, and it's going to be digested. There's going to be digestive juices, there's going to be bile, there's going to be various poisons produced as this sits there and breaks down, and the longer it's in your system, more poison. Okay, do you follow me? There should be an elimination if you have a meal coming into your system. There should be an elimination for that meal 12 to 24 hours later. If you're eating 3 meals daily, but you're only eliminating once a day or once every other day, you must think and ask the question, where do you think the rest of that food is hiding? What's happening to it? Why is it not passing out of my system? And what is it doing in there to my body? The very first cause of weight gain is toxic accumulation in the bowel. That's the very first cause. And by the way, that is actually one of the key reasons why a lot of times we find people are underweight and they can't put weight on. They're trying to put weight on, but again, they have a very toxic bowel, and nutrients are not being absorbed as they should. The colon can expand up to 5 times its regular size. This is something called megacolon, and I'm actually going to show you a textbook picture in a moment that you can see what actually happens when the colon has expanded with this matter in there. Now, Dr. Jack Lamar says that most people, most of us, are walking around with at least 7 pounds of fecal matter in their large intestines, and he says, I have seen patients lose that much weight and their stomach bulge immediately following a colon treatment or getting colon hydrotherapy. And I know in my own practice, I have seen that happen as well. I've actually had an individual who came into my office and lost 10 pounds. Now, that's not common. It's not something, if you're a person that's hoping to lose some weight, that's not a weight loss trick or gimmick, okay? But it just shows that there was a lot of matter that was sitting there in that colon that shouldn't have been sitting there, that needed to get cleaned out. Now, this is an actual x-ray picture, and I don't know if you can see this real clear. But this is a picture of one of my clients, and she actually asked me to use her x-ray in presentations, and over the years I have used her x-ray to show individuals what happens when the colon has been left and neglected, and what can happen over many years. Now, this person, from the time of a child to now she was in her 60s years later, had found that her system would not work at all. She would come to me to get that colon cleaned out, but it would not work on its own. And finally, after months and months of working with this individual, and we seemed to be getting nowhere, I finally had her go for x-rays. I said, something is just not right here. We need to see what's happening. And when she came back with these x-rays, I could see what the problem was. Now, do you remember in our picture at the very beginning how our ascending colon comes up, transverse across the middle, and descending down? Okay. Now, I don't know if you can see this real clear, but this is the ascending colon coming up here. It's very bulged out. Okay, a lot of matter built up there. Then it comes up and it drops way down there. Okay. This is what's called a prolapsed transverse colon. The transverse colon has dropped from the weight of matter sitting in there. The gravity has actually pulled that colon down. And now obviously this is going to impair good bowel function because now matter has to go this way. And you can see it's very large, goes up again underneath the spleen, and here it's coming down. Now it's very narrow, bulging out a little bit here down our descending colon, very, very narrow in here. And then down here it's got a big mass in here. And this is the reason why this individual was having such trouble with their colon. Now, the reason I like to include this in my presentation is because people will come to me and they're very discouraged. And they say, is there any hope for me? And I want to tell you, your colon is a muscle. And just like any other muscle in the body, it can be retrained. Now, we can actually have permanent damage done, which a section like in here would be more permanent damage that's done. She will never have that perfect bowel function. But I'm happy to tell you, after about 8 months, she achieved a bowel movement every day, which will probably be the best that her body will ever be able to do. And I want that to be an encouragement to you because so many people come to me and they're discouraged and they think, you know what, there's no hope. I'm going to have to take these pills for the rest of my life. No, you don't have to. Start treating your body well. And I'm going to give you some things here shortly, things that you can do to help retrain your body, things that you can do naturally to help your body to eliminate better. And you just need to work with your body, treat it as a muscle that needs to be gotten back in shape. Okay? And if her body could return to that state of good health as it has, then your condition can as well. This is a textbook picture that I actually wanted to show you here. This gentleman was taken in for surgery. His bowels had stopped working. And this is a picture of him on the operating table right before they removed his entire large intestine. You can see his entire large intestine actually laying there on the table. You can see the size of it compared to the doctor's hand on that colon. This is what is called megacolon. And I show you this because this is something that can happen if we allow our bodies to continue to eliminate in a poor fashion. And if we continue to put poor food choices into our system, this is what can happen. Now, how to retrain the bowel. We're going to look at some things that you can do to get your bowel functioning in a way that it should. The very first thing is water. You need at least 1 ounce of water for every 2 pounds of body weight. And we'll talk more about water in another lecture, but water is very important. You need it for every metabolic function in your body. So you need at least 1 ounce for every 2 pounds of body weight. Take your body weight, divide it in half. That's how many ounces of water you need to be consuming in a day. If it's hot, you need to be getting more water in than that. The next thing is exercise. Now, this slide says a minimum of 20 minutes 3 times a week, and I would say that would be barely enough. You really need to be exercising at least 5 times a week. It's very important. If you want to be well, you're going to have to exercise, and exercise helps keep that colon moving, helps keep your digestive tract moving well. Now, every morning when you arise, your body should eliminate. It's been working through the night, processing. You should have a bowel movement shortly after rising. And if you don't, you can try some simple things like stretching or a glass of warm water, not hot. Hot water will tend to cause the bowel to become what's called paralyzed. It'll just sit there. But warm water can help stimulate that bowel to function. So that's something that you can try to do naturally. The next thing is increasing your intake of fiber. Lots of fresh fruits and vegetables, and eating a well-balanced diet of whole natural food. Very important that you eat a lot of fresh foods in your diet. When you cook a food, you actually break down some of those fibers. It will not have as much fiber as the raw food. So it's better that you put more of the raw food into your diet to make sure that you've got a good quantity of fiber going in. In fact, a lot of times what I find when people come to see me is they're not getting anywhere close to even what the recommendations are for fiber in a day. Your need for fiber is going to be in around, depending on your age and so forth, but probably in around about 35, 40 grams of fiber in a day. And I find for most people, they're not even getting half of that. If you want to try and experiment on yourself, write down what you're eating in a day. You can go online, you can find out how much fiber is consumed in those foods that you're eating, and see if you're anywhere close to the amount of fiber you should be consuming in a day. And if you're not, you need to make some adjustments there to what you're eating. Okay, next, temperance. We talked a little bit about how we need to allow adequate time between our meals for the food to digest and get out of our stomach before we put anything else in, that not even a morsel of food should come into our mouths in between mealtime. We also need to make sure that our meals are not too large or too small. If we put too much food into our stomach has a very hard time to move, and it will take a long time for that food to be processed and moved out of the stomach, and fermentation or putrefaction will start as a result. And if our meal is too small, there's not actually enough fiber there to start that peristaltic action. We talked about peristaltic action, moving the food from the mouth down the esophagus into the stomach. That same peristaltic action works throughout the whole food tube, moving that food along. And if we're not consuming enough fiber, it's not going to have good peristaltic action happening there in the food tube. We need to also be careful not to eat within 3 hours of going to bed. That's very important. When you go to bed, your digestive organs want to have a rest. And you will find you will rest better, you'll be more alert the next morning, and you'll actually be more hungry for breakfast if you don't eat too close to going to bed. Also, we need to avoid eating when we're upset. When we're upset and we eat, our stomach is not in a condition to process food. It's in a fight or flight condition, and that is not a good condition to process food. So if you're upset, it's better to skip that meal completely. Just have some water and wait till your next meal time before you eat again. And the last thing on here is to keep on schedule. Our bodies are very finely tuned instruments, and our bodies like to go to bed at the same time. They like to get up at the same time. They like to have their meals at the same time. And if you're eating at 7 o'clock today and 8 o'clock you're having breakfast tomorrow, and then you skip breakfast the next day and have it at 5 o'clock the next day, it's all over the place. Your body doesn't know what to expect. And that will upset your digestive process. That will lead to constipation. So you need to be careful to eat your meals within a half an hour of the same time every day. So if you're going to have breakfast at 7 o'clock today, you can have it 7:30 or even a half an hour earlier, 6:30 if you want, the next day. Keep it within a half an hour of that breakfast time. Don't go outside of that, because you're going to cause your body to be thrown off schedule. Okay, here's some natural remedies that you can do for constipation. People will come to us, they're taking oftentimes very toxic things into their system in order to try to get their bodies to eliminate, and I like to share with individuals what they can do naturally, that they don't have to take these things into their bodies. So acid fruits and vegetables are excellent laxatives, especially in their raw form. So if you include things like oranges, grapefruit, plums, prunes, all of your berries and your fresh tomatoes, things like that, those are acid-producing fruits and vegetables that are natural laxatives in the body. That's something that you can do, consume. Also taking a good probiotic, 2 or 3 capsules a day until constipation improves. Probiotics, you pick them up at a health food store generally. Some grocery stores actually carry them now. You'll see them under the name usually Acidophilus. And you want to get a brand that is refrigerated. They have brands that are supposed to be shelf stable, that you can buy them that are not refrigerated. I generally do not find that these brands are very effective. So I like to recommend that you get a brand that is refrigerated. Keep it in your refrigerator. Take 2 or 3 capsules with your meals. It's not something that's toxic. It's not something that you can overdose on. And it's something that can be very effective for improving constipation. Also, buying whole flax seeds and grinding several tablespoons fresh each day can add extra fiber into your body, and it can help to move things along in a more timely fashion. I don't recommend buying pre-ground flaxseed. Flaxseed, as Rudy had mentioned in an earlier lecture, flaxseed contains your omegas, essential fatty acids that are very sensitive to heat and to light, and you need to make sure, and to temperature, you need to make sure that those are being stored in a cool, dry place, and that you grind them fresh when you're ready to use them so that they will not start to break down. Okay, also taking, these are not, you don't have to do all of these things, okay? You can pick and choose, but these are just a bunch of natural things because what might work for one person may not work for someone else. Everyone's body is different, so I've put up a whole bunch of them here, and you can pick and choose something that might work for you. Taking 1/4 to 1/2 of a teaspoon of psyllium, and you take that every day, mix it into a full glass of water, or you can use juice. Make sure to drink plenty of water throughout the day. In fact, what I generally recommend is after you've taken your drink with the psyllium, follow that up with another glass of water. And then make sure that you're drinking a lot of water through the day. And that can help wonderfully. I've used that with many, many people. And psyllium is like a broom. It brooms through the intestine and helps keep that intestinal tract clean. Drinking fresh vegetable juices every day, that can be very beneficial. Taking 1 to 2 tablespoons of nutritional oil daily can also be very beneficial. This is providing your essential fatty acids. This would be things like cold-pressed flaxseed oil or your pumpkin seed or hemp seed oils, those nutritional oils. Very, very useful in remedying constipation. Use more garlic in cooking. Garlic contains allicin, and allicin stimulates the muscular action of the walls of the intestinal tract. So garlic, you can use that in cooking. You can use it fresh. Garlic is a wonderful aid to help with constipation. Now, the very last one I put up there, it is what's termed a natural remedy. But ideally, we don't like to recommend supplements. When people come to see us, we very rarely recommend supplements. We like you to go to your grocery store or to your garden because I believe that the nutrition that our bodies need come from the foods that God has prepared for us. And those foods are your very best source of nutrition because they will contain nutrients that science has not even yet discovered. You will be way ahead of science if you consume the foods that are high in the nutrients that you're needing in your body. But if everything else fails and you're finding that your body is still not working well, you can take magnesium anywhere from 250 to 800 milligrams daily. Take it in divided dosages. And what you want to do is take that. If you find you're taking too much, you'll just get loose stool, and then you just have to back that off a little bit. It's not toxic to your body. You can pick this up at a health food store. And this will work very effectively to help move your bowels along. But I don't recommend that you remain doing this. A better thing to do is to eat your foods that are high in chlorophyll, very rich in chlorophyll, because they contain magnesium naturally. Eat a large salad, have a big green smoothie. We'll show you more in another lecture on green smoothies, how you can make them. And this contains chlorophyll naturally that will help the body to move things along. So that's a better source to do. But this is something you can use if you have a problem where the body just does not want to get going. Now we want to look at some things that will affect good elimination and good digestion in the body. Poor posture. Why do you think that is? And usually this is where everybody sits up straight. Okay, why do you think poor posture will cause a problem with digestion? Okay, we're all squished over, aren't we? Our digestive organs are all squished together and they're not going to function well. Very good. Liquid foods like soup. Why would that be a problem? I'm not talking stew. I'm talking like a very liquid soup. Okay, very little fiber, exactly. Once that liquid is absorbed, like we read in that quote, the liquid has to be absorbed first. Once that liquid is absorbed, there's very little fiber left, and that peristaltic action is not going to happen through the rest of the food tube. If you're going to have a bowl of soup, what I recommend is have a nice big sandwich with that, or a great big green salad, or something with some substance, some fiber. Have that along with your liquid soup, and you'll find your system will do better with that. Tight clothing. Why is tight clothing, why would that impair digestion and elimination? Okay, posture scrunched our digestive organs this way. Tight clothing is going to scrunch our digestive organs this way. And it's not, our bodies are not going to function well. So we need to be careful to let those organs work in there the way God intended them to do. Heat and sweating. We didn't really talk too much about this, but why do you think heat and sweating would cause constipation? Okay, we're losing water from the body. And most times I find people are not drinking anywhere close to their 1 ounce for every 2 pounds of body weight, which is your minimum. And when you're hot and you're sweating, you need to be actually putting more than that. So that will dehydrate your body, and you will end up with problems with constipation. Inactivity. This is a big one. Inactivity. As we've mentioned, if we're not moving, our organs are not going to function effectively. So we need exercise, a minimum. In fact, I don't really feel that 3 times a week is adequate. You really need to be out there 5 times a week. It's for your health. It's for good quality of life. So invest in yourself and take that time. Meat diet, a mostly meat diet. Now, we haven't really talked about this tonight, but a mostly meat diet, meat contains 0 fiber. Okay, there's no fiber in meat. It's going to move very sluggishly through the digestive tract. In fact, it can take up to 72 hours to move through. Now, how long was transit time supposed to be? 12 to 24 hours. 72 hours would mean what was happening to that meat. It's a protein. What was going to happen to proteins if they're sitting in there? Okay, they're going to putrefy. So that is what's happening. You think about if you left a pound of hamburger or a nice steak on your counter for 72 hours in a nice warm environment, what would happen? It would be rotten. You wouldn't want to eat it. And that's exactly what happens in our bodies. So mostly meat diet is going to tend to poor health and very poor elimination. And sugar, we've talked about, that paralyzes a certain portion, the jejunum in the small intestine, and actually will cause fermentation to happen. So I would like to encourage you that as you think about the things that were presented this evening, as you think about your body, this is the temple. God wants to dwell in you, and I really encourage you to treat your body as the temple of God, which He intended it to be. Thank you.